to be recording this event, so just wanted to make you aware of. We are asking all the participants to please hold their questions or comments until the end of this event, when we will host a community forum for questions and answers. We will be turning on captioning. Please excuse any typos that might occur in the captioning. So this evening, we have the pleasure of being joined by local residents who will share the origins of Kramer Manor. This is the neighborhood by McGinn School, which was founded as a Black community almost 100 years ago. And we'll learn about their experiences living there this evening. Kramer Manor's rich history is built on pride, neighborhood bonds, spirit, and perseverance against racial discrimination. And the rich history of this neighborhood remains unknown to a lot of our local residents even today. And that makes this even more important that we are all here together tonight. So Kramer Manor is a neighborhood of about 100 homes that front up to Martine and Scotch Plains and Fanwood. They're bookended on either side, but on the other. And if you've ever driven by McGinn School, you've driven through the Kramer Manor. Kramer Manor was originally designated as a Black neighborhood, as I said, 100 years ago, and it will be celebrating its centennial in 2024. The Kramer Manor residents have teamed with members of Social Justice Manor to record their history, to capture the voices of this historical Black enclave. They're here tonight to share the story of Kramer Manor with you. So with that, I want to welcome the Kramer Manor project team, including Pamela Brooks, give a wave, Pamela Brownstein, Kevin Eldridge, Derek Garrett, Jill Jackson-Jones, and Douglas Lane, as well as former Kramer Manor resident, McGinn graduate, and JCC staff member, Kayla Bremberg. So with that, I'm going to turn the screen over to you so that we can learn all about Kramer Manor.
By the way, okay, Mom, this one is one. He said he's going to take the pieces that I need.
To be free, I feel that I could live any place that I care to in the United States. I call that being free. Welcome to Kramer Manor. Kramer was a realtor from New York. He used to come to Fanwood on a train and walk all the way to Lincoln Avenue in Fanwood over my aunt's house to sell property. I purchased my property from Kramer, and he would only sell to Blacks. At this time, we are a diverse neighborhood. Thank you. God bless you. My name is Elwood Green.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome again to tonight's presentation on the legacy of Kramer Manor. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jill Jackson-Jones, and I am a current longstanding resident of Fanwood, of course, in the Kramer Manor section. I'm also project co-lead for this initiative, as well as a member of Social Justice Matters. The video that you just watched is a segment from the Kramer Manor history film that was created based off of the findings and research about the neighborhood. The gentleman speaking is the late Deacon Elwood Green, who was a long-standing resident of Fanwood. And Deacon Green was the catalyst and the foundation of our work that we bring to you tonight. If it weren't for Mr. Green spending time with us to tell us his stories, we wouldn't have been here tonight to present the history to you. Thank you, Mr. Green. Next slide. As you can imagine, work like this demands a dedicated team of people who are really passionate about history and bringing history like this to life to our community. So I want to take a moment to introduce these individuals that I've been working with for the past 2 years on this initiative. We have Pamela Brooks, who is a former Scotch Plains resident, as well as Social Justice Matters board member, and also my committee co-lead. We have Kevin Eldridge, who is a Scotch Plains resident from Kramer Manor. And Kevin is also one of the founders of the Kramer Manor reunion, which you're going to hear more about later in the presentation. We have Derek Garrett, who is also a family resident from Kramer Manor, and he is also one of the founders of the Kramer Manor reunion. Pamela Brownstein, who is also a Scotch Plains resident and a Social Justice Matters board member. And of course, we have Douglas Lane, who is a former Scotch Plains Kramer Manor resident. He also served on the Scotch Plains Family Board of Education, as well as Scotch Plains Recreation Commission. Next slide. So why did we move forward with this initiative now? Well, one, we want to share the Kramer Manor legacy. In order to leave a legacy, you have to share the story. To educate our community on the foundational contribution of Kramer Manor families, to pay homage to the Black families that persevered, as well as to tell our stories. There are many of us within the committee that are from the neighborhood. And so it's a chance for us to tell our stories, as well as to preserve our Scotch Plains family history. And that's key because the Kramer Manor history and our Black history is really our town history. Next slide. Pam?
Yeah, she's on me.
Okay. Sorry. Back in 2020, Jill mentioned to me that she and Kevin Eldridge were eager to collect recollections and record them of longtime Kramer Manor residents. So we assembled a team of volunteers from Kramer Manor and from Social Justice Matters, SJM for short. With SJM enthusiastically on board with some funding, we applied for and received a 2021 Union County Heart Grant for interview training and transcription costs and research tools. We produced an ad journal to contain the 17-page historical narrative we were writing. We recorded and transcribed 15 interviews. The team's labor was all volunteer and continues to be all volunteer. Scotch Plains resident Bill Flagg of ERA Queen City Realty and Richard Ransom of Collegiate Title Realty provided pro bono help with land records. COVID presented obstacles to our research, but thank goodness for online genealogical and newspaper databases and the expert help we received from local librarians Michelle Willis of Scotch Plains Public Library and Sarah Hull of Plainfield Public Library, along with Nancy Piawar of the Plainfield Historical Society. On Juneteenth, we invited Melissa Ellen Grote, our oral history trainer, to present a public Zoom presentation so others could get started on their own family or neighborhood research. Marcus Nelson and team member Derek Garrett produced a Kramer Manor film. You saw a bit of it, and you can watch the whole film by going to the SJM website. As Jill has said, it premiered at the September 2021 block party thrown by Kramer Manor residents. Right now, we are in the process of creating a landing page on the SJM website for the interviews. The Scotch Plains, Fanwood, and Plainfield Public Libraries have been offered copies of all project materials as well. The next Kramer Manor reunion will be held in 2023, and the centennial will be celebrated in 2024. You will hear more about these events later in the program. Next slide, please.
We got the mute.
Yeah, the story of Kramer Manor began on May 7, 1924, when Kramer Realties was incorporated by the state of New York. Less than 1 month later, on June 5, 1924, Kramer Realties Incorporated purchased a 51-acre lot for $11,000 from the estate of Frank Woodruff. The lot was in the township of Scotch Plains and in the borough of Fanwood. The sale was financed with a note at an interest rate of 6%. It called for an initial payment of $1,500 in 1924 and a $1,500 payment in each of the following 6 years. Immediately after the sale, the parcel was surveyed and 606 lots, most of them 25 feet wide by 100 feet deep, were laid out. The survey was completed in July 1924, and the plan was approved on September 4, 1924. Next slide, please.
What you see here is the original map for Kramer Manor. Now, I remember we were doing the Kramer Manor reunion one year, and we were talking about a map, and Mr. Green actually had an actual map. This is the original map of Kramer Manor. Originally, all the streets were supposed to meet Cliffwood Street. We're supposed to come down and meet Cliffwood Street. And if you notice at the top of the map, there's a street called Wilson Avenue. Okay, Wilson Avenue actually is the land that McGinn is on now. So when I'll get into a little story a little later on how McGinn came to be where it is, because the Jewish temple actually was slated to go, Temple Israel was slated to go up top, and McGinn School was going to go closer to Martina Avenue. But I'll get into that a little bit later. But this map was the original map. Now, a lot of streets, some streets have changed, and the layout has changed. But when you went into to buy our land, this is the map you saw to buy your parcel. Next slide.
So Papa John, so if you wanted to buy something, you had to go to Papa John's house.
Yeah, right,
Now,
Papa
what
John.
happened?
Right, Papa
Kramer
John.
lived in,
Papa John,
his office was in New York.
in his basement would
Every
have everything
Saturday
laid out.
And Sunday,
Right.
Kramer would walk from the train station to my aunt's house on Lincoln Avenue.
Okay.
And him and Papa John would have the wine, and he would lay out his big map. And people would come in and purchase property.
That's where you get your lots for the area.
Right, right. So anyhow, at that time, the lots was $250. And I knew a lot of people, especially from Westfield, that purchased property, but they lost the taxes. And when, like, I purchased my property from Kramer himself, and every Sunday, when I would come out of the church, Kramer was right in the front of the church. They said, Elwood, Elwood. So sometimes I give him 25 cents. Sometimes I give him 50 cents. Sometimes I give him $1.
Who were the Kramers? Our project spent a great deal of time trying to figure this out. Harry Kramer and his older brother Hyman were Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe who apparently attempted several business ventures. And that included formation of Kramer Realties, Inc. of New York City in the early decades of the 20th century. The brothers sold the Kramer Manor lots and collected payments over time, allowing purchasers leeway. As you just heard from Deacon Elwood Green, Harry would show up to collect the payments when local churches let out. Harry had one daughter, Ruth, who died in 1918. Hyman had a large family. One daughter, Marion Goldie Kramer, married John Cook, a Black man. At one point, the Cook family lived on Daniel Place in Kramer Manor. Hyman died in 1941 and Harry in 1956. and Kramer Realties was dissolved in 1963 after a period of inactivity. Next slide, please. This ad from the New York Amsterdam News on April 27, 1927, shows that building lots rather than houses were for sale. The lots were typically 25 by 100 feet and sold for $250 to $300 each. Most buyers bought 2 lots. The location, as you can see in the ad, was touted as convenient to highways and trains. And placement of the ad in a New York publication shows that the Kramers were getting the word out over a broad area. Through the years, several ads appeared in other African-American publications in New York, all plugging the advantages of Kramer Manor. Next slide, please.
Although it appears that Kramer Realties faced hatred and opposition against selling of property to Blacks, lots continued to be sold to Blacks in Kramer Manor. Through our research, we have found one of our early buyers from Kramer Manor Realties was Mrs. Collie Lee, who lived at 48 Trenton Avenue in Fanwood. Mrs. Collie Lee also used her home to host church service. One interesting fact we also found is that Mrs. Collie Lee was also Robert and William Lee's grandmother. Many of you may know Mr. William Lee from Scotch Plains Fanwood High School and his driving school, Lee Driving School, who has taught many of us how to drive as well as our kids how to drive. You'll hear more about both brothers later in the presentation. Next slide. Our Kramer Manor property owners were denied federally bank loans because of their race. Therefore, many neighbors and other Black builders across town helped each other to build their own homes. These photos are photos of the Hadley family at 35 Trenton Avenue in the 1940s. And my home is right next to this home. I remember the Hadley family. I even remember the bushes that's next to his house in the third picture on the right. In a recent interview, Anna B. Townsend Hendricks, a former Scotch Plains Kramer Manor resident, gave us some insight into their way of life during this period.
In the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s, we had partial dirt roads with ruts that didn't continue and formed into walking paths. No sidewalks and no electricity, so we used kerosene lamps. We also had outhouses because we didn't have inside plumbing. There was no running water, so we had to carry water from the spring located off from Evelyn Street and from a well which was on Miss Bertha Lee's property, Shed Pump on Trenton Avenue. Later, the town of Scotch Plains installed a spigot on Martine Avenue opposite King Street, where we had to tote the water from that location. We heated our house with wood or coal, and my mother cooked on a wood stove.
Kramer Manor residents faced many obstacles to home ownership, including the practice of redlining. In 1934, the Federal Housing Authority, the FHA, was formed to increase home construction and home ownership. The FHA operated various loan insurance programs to put home ownership within reach of people they considered eligible. These benefits would help white people, but had a devastating effect on the Black population. Maps of 239 of the country's most populated areas were color-coded to rate neighborhoods from most desirable, colored green, to least desirable, red. The great preponderance of Black households was in the red-colored, least desirable zone, and were automatically denied FHA-backed loans for home improvement or mortgages. Now, the Kramer Manor neighborhood, and indeed most of South Scotch Plains and South Fanwood, were considered largely undeveloped, and therefore not graded or officially redlined on these maps. But as you can see on the screen, although the traditionally, and you can see the white spots on the screen are not colored in because of that. But the traditionally Black neighborhoods of downtown and Jerseyland were indeed colored red. However, do not doubt that Kramer Manor was redlined. In 1941, Harry Kramer approached two banks to secure a loan for about a dozen buyers. All had good credit and both banks were willing to issue mortgages if the FHA would approve them. But the FHA stated that, quote, no loans will be given to colored developments, end quote. When the banks denied the loans, Kramer wrote to President Franklin Roosevelt, recounting the experience, vouching for the applicants, and asking, Mr. President, is there anything you can do to assist us in getting a loan? Next slide. You can research your own neighborhood and see how it was graded at the interactive site Mapping Inequality. And here's the URL for that site. Next slide, please.
In the years after Harry Kramer's letter to President Franklin Roosevelt, the walls of Jim Crow segregation had begun to crumble, and some of the most outrageous forms of discrimination were being swept away. After the death of FDR in 1945, Harry Truman became president and set forth to bring Black people in small halting ways to the mainstream of American life. So by the time in 1948, when this had before us, he could have said that the loans were approved by the FHA funding. Next slide, please.
Yes, please mute your phone. Please mute. The voice earlier needs no introduction. Anna B. Jones Townsend, former Kramer Manor resident, is the author of this amazing book, Kramer Manor Urban Renewal Project. Anna's book is available on Lulu and available at the Scotch Plains Library. It's a must read. In summary, giving everything away, Anna Jones fought a federal urban renewal project with other residential families that allowed families to stay in their homes and not be displaced. In her book, she provided actual newspaper clippings to complement the days and times from the 1961-62 Jewish area. So please put your hands together. If you look here in the box, it says Pam Townsend. Miss Anna Jones is with us today. Just give her flowers. Mwah. Love you, baby. Next slide, please.
Caleb, you could play the video. I mean, the
Our
audio.
Kramer Manor neighborhood and the Shady Rest neighborhood may not have had perfect families, but we were the perfect example of people who were willing to come together and fight for our community. Our Kramer Manor.
Okay. Right now we have on the screen is a couple of notables from the area. Our area was rich with a lot of people. We had some celebrities. We have Derek Character, who's not on this. Well, I'm going to already go through the slide here, but we had Derek Character, who used to play with the LA Lakers. He's from Kramer Manor. We have a bunch of doctors from Kramer Manor, and we have lawyers that all came from Kramer Manor. Everybody is pretty familiar with Robert Lee. Robert Lee was the first Black Scotch Plains police officer, and also he was the first Black Union County investigator. And Bob Lee is actually the brother to Bill Lee. What Bill Lee was my football coach when I played at Scotch Plains High School. And what people didn't realize about Bill Lee, of how much of an athlete he really was in college and in high school. Um, Went to school on a scholarship, was great in baseball, was great in basketball, track. He was an all-around athlete. A lot of people didn't know that about. I know I didn't know this about Mr. Lee when he was my coach. He was just the man that made me run, so I didn't like him much because I had to run a lot. And we also had Mr. Britton, Dr. Peter Britton, Scott and Kathy Britton's dad, and he was the first member of the president of the Board of Education. And we also have Kyle Jackson. Kyle Jackson, Jill's brother, is the first Black Fanwood police officer. And we also have Timmy Green, who is the second Black Fanwood police officer who is serving now on the force. The Lees actually played, I was really surprised in doing all the interviews of how much the Lees played in how Kramer Manor looks today and how Kramer Manor is set up. And we'll get into that in another slide a little bit down the line. Next slide.
The families of Kramer Manor were quite active in community affairs. The articles on screen before you now capture some of the initiatives in Scotch Plains and Fanwood that Kramer Manor residents participated in. One was the dialogue program of the Scotch Plains Fanwood Human Rights Council. This was a forum for interracial discussion and served as an open line of communication between races. Mr. Nathaniel Sims, a good friend, living on Washington Avenue, was a key contributor to the council. Another organization was the Black Coalition of Scotch Plains and Fanwood. Their objective was to encourage Black residents to take part in community efforts to ensure that Kramer's voices were heard without the need for external organizations. Andrew Blake of Trenton Avenue was vice chairman of the coalition. When the Federal Urban Renewal Project was abandoned and the site and the plans for McGinn Elementary School went forward, the town went ahead with major infrastructure improvements to finally bring Kramer Manor up to the standard of the rest of Scotch Plains and Fanwood. You can see in the picture top right that about the cleanup, that residents of Kramer Manor worked hard to clean up the parts of the neighborhood that had been used as a dump by the larger community for decades. The spirit of community involvement was really one of the main reasons that residents of Kramer Manor and Jerseyland were successful in stopping the 1962 urban renewal proposal. Kramer Manor's success was one of the rare, truly rare victories for Black people who fought to stop urban renewal initiatives from destroying their neighborhoods. Much more often than not, urban renewal meant Negro removal, as a cover article of Ebony magazine described it when I was a little boy. Next slide, please.
Well, growing up in Kramer Manor was more, it was life-changing. We learned things growing up in that park about working with each other, respecting each other, helping each other. And to this day, we still, the kids that grew up together that are still in the area, we still hang out together. We go out together. Our families know each other. It's more like a family, a cohesive unit of all of us from the area that grew up together. And when we see each other, it's like we saw it. I might not have seen you in maybe a year or two. When I see you, it's like I saw you yesterday. Between the sports that was generated there, the arts and crafts. Kramer Manor had everything you can name. There were circuses at Kramer Manor. There was a circus that came to Kramer Manor every year until I guess there was an incident with one of the animals staring in the window. It got kind of creepy, but the circus kind of disappeared. And it was a pretty well-known circus. And sitting around, and if you talk with some of the kids that were going to the circus back in the day, the stories are hilarious about the circus being in our neighborhood. But that's just one little piece of a giant pie that made Kramer Manor. The park is where everybody sewed their roots together at Kramer Manor Park. Derek, do you have anything you want to add?
Just that, it was just very competitive. We, like you said, we had a softball team, we had a football team, and different parts of the community would come to Kramer, and it was just that competitive. First thing we did when we wake up in the morning was deliver the newspapers, go to Kramer Park, and parents had to come down there to drag us out, to come at the end of the night to have us come have some dinner. But we'll talk more about it in the future.
I also have to mention too, there were 2 pools in Kramer Manor area, and the one pool, well, there was nobody from the area was going to the pool or allowed in the pool. But and I hate to do this, and I'm going to do this, but the greens were the key holders to the pool club after hours club. Okay, so there was a way that we went swimming in the pool after the pool was closed. So and the greens were, oh my gosh, the greens were great with facilitating use of the pool. So we always find a way to have fun. We used the woods, we used the park, whatever was around us, we used it.
And I let these kids swim because I can't swim.
This is Bobby.
But I let these kids swim as long as they didn't go in that deep water, And they would swim, it'd be dark out. I said, just keep your voice down, don't be hollering. because people in the neighborhood can hear you, and the people over maybe a little past the gate, they don't be doing. They tell them, So, these kids got a lot of swimming in. And they did swim down there, and there was a couple of guys who my brother knew from the high school and coaches. Ray Snitzer, he was one of them. He was the principal. Yeah, when I was in school. Ray was one of the guys that turned his back the other way as long as I was there with the kids, and Eugene Schiller, they turned their back. They let the brothers swim.
Now, I just want to clear this up. That was Bob Lee talking, and Bob Lee, he was a new police officer at the time working for the police department, and he would make side money just sitting there watching the pool. And as you see, he would watch the pool, a little bit, So that he's just recanting from when he was sitting there patrolling the pool.
Okay. Before the Roosevelt Avenue block party, it was the Dolores Garrett backyard birthday party. Dolores Garrett comes from a fairly large family, and our family, loving to cook and especially barbecue, would host a backyard party for her birthday. The yard became so small that we moved the party to the cul-de-sac, to the Roosevelt Avenue cul-de-sac. Roosevelt Avenue families formed a committee from about the mid-1990s until 2008, hosted these parties, and the committee members were the Garretts, the Greens, the Moores, Thomas, and Cooks. George, from the Scotch Plains Fanwood local TV, filmed about 4 parties, and that from time to time, You can be seen on local TV from the Scotch Plains fan with local TV. We grew up in a very special residential neighborhood where everyone knew everyone and everyone was like family. It was 2009 that we outgrew the Roosevelt Avenue Block Party and moved to Kramer Manor Park, hence the birth of the reunion. Every 2 years to date, the Kramer Manor Park Reunion Committee hosts a full day of games, food, activities, and music, all for free. The next reunion is scheduled for July 2023, so mark your calendars and everyone is invited. So we hope to see you then. And in 2024, we'll be celebrating 100 years.
We started the Kramer Manor reunion. When we started the Kramer Manor reunion, it was an ideal. We started it. We just going to see how it went. It went great. So we did it the first year, the second year, the third year. Honestly, we were at each other's throats. We were burnt out. We said we can't do this every year. So that's why we do it every other year. And it is open to all of Scotch Plains. We have people come in from California, Texas, Maine. They come in just for the event. Locally, we have people come in from Newark, Plainfield, all over Scotch Plains. So it's a community event, but it's open to everyone. And we invite everyone in just to share a little bit of our community. I mean, we have Derek cooking. I'm playing music. Jill is running back and forth with games and everything else. But it's a fun time. And if anybody wants to help, just get in touch with myself, Derek, or Jill, and we will find a spot for you on the Kramer Manor Reunion Committee.
And this is our Kramer Manor neighborhood today. We now have a diverse neighborhood with families that really have embraced our rich Black history. This picture is from the 2021 Kramer Manor Block Party on Trenton Avenue, where we opened up our block to old and new Kramer Manor families and friends from the entire Scotch Plains family community. This event was organized by families from Kramer Manor and supported by generous community donations and purchased advertisements in our history journal. During the event, we connected with our current and former neighbors. Kids played games, crafts, and of course, we ate some really good food, fried fish, and enjoyed amazing music. At the end of the event, at dusk, outside on Trenton Avenue, we debuted the Kramer Manor history film to our guests. It really was an outstanding event, and I think the best thing about it is it really reflected the appreciation of our history in Kramer Manor. Next slide. Now moving on to our Kramer Manor Q&A with Caleb. We're happy to have Caleb Rembert, who is also a former Kramer Manor Scotch Plains resident. He is also a teacher at the JCC, and he's going to give us a glimpse of his time living in Kramer Manor, and then he's going to pose some questions to the Kramer Manor Project Committee.
When I lived in Kramer Manor, I always felt humbled and welcomed because of the outpouring just friendliness in the community. My family, knew a lot of people on the street, and my father was always one to knock on other people's doors to make sure that he was known. But me personally, as a child in my childhood, I can honestly say during my childhood, I was habitually a child that would go to school and go home. I didn't have much of a social life outside of school. And I would say that Kramer Manor Park was a key part of my life because of the fact that I didn't go to play dates or go to parties or so on and so forth. It made me just go outside. And just going outside was the outlet for me. When I would go to the park, it was my time to pretty much just let go of any frustration or any negative energy and just be a kid. And it wasn't many times, I felt like a kid, way back in the day. But when I would go to the park, I always felt, at home, because the park meant something to me. It meant more to me than just a park. It was a place that I can go to and just be me, and be a kid, and not be isolated. The park is a place that where people can come together, with family, friends, and etc. I even remember one time, in my later years at Kramer Manor, before I exited the community, I went to the park with my sister and my sister's friend, and my sister was in college at this time, and we just it was my sister's friend's birthday, and we gave her balloons. She came back from college, so we didn't, we haven't seen her in X amount of years, but I mean, I haven't seen her in X amount of time, but we gave her balloons, we gave her a nice little celebration for her birthday, and it just put that in place, that it really meant a lot, the park in general, as a value-based place. And that's where I learned a lot of values from my own personal self at the park. And I felt like the apple didn't fall far from the tree in terms of the different generations going to the park or just being in the community. This was a family place. Kramer Manor Park was a family place. Kramer Manor community is a family place. It's bigger than family, really. It's love. It's just getting to know other people. It meant more than just a park. It was just more than just a community. It was bigger than family. So I'm going to pose a couple questions to the committee. Living Kramer Manor, living Kramer Manor community was very crucial to me due to it building my family and personal values. Do you think living in Kramer Manor has grown your own personal family slash personal values?
I can say yes. Yes. Living in Kramer, I do a lot of different things, a lot of diverse things, and all of them deal with people. And I would not be able to deal with people or interact with people as well as I do if I didn't have that experience at the park.
Thank you for that. Kramer Manor Park is essentially the nucleus of Kramer Manor. What is any of your experiences with the park, and what is your best memory there?
Who's that director? Who's gonna take that?
Well, my experience with the park is very different than Jill's and Kevin's and Derek's. In the 70s, they had pretty much an idyllic free range kind of childhood. Just don't get caught in a creek. And they went wherever and did whatever. By the time I moved here in 1995, you had organized recreation. My time on the Scotch Plains Rec Commission, many of the parks were renovated, and Kramer Manor Park was frankly renovated to a very high standard, where it became the best soccer field in the city. And you didn't have where you could just get games out of the shed and go have a ball, because everybody was fighting to get field time. Then when the basketball courts were improved and lit up, then the summers were really dominated. I had a blast as a parent coach, and then as a coordinator after Ken Miller had moved on. We'd have a draft, there'd be teams, and we'd play, until the lights went out from probably 6 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock till, 9:30, quarter to 10, from probably right after July 4th till the third week of August, and we all had a great time.
I got the precursor to that. You guys had we had Lamont Davis, right? Lamont Davis was one of the park counselors, and we had the inter-park baseball league. So Kramer would go play Farley Park. All the different parks would play each other, and we would jump into Lamont's VW van. That's the whole baseball team, everybody, 9 people, and we would go to these different games. And we would have also we had a field day, and we had a field day, and that continued on to when I ran the park. When Norma and myself ran the park. After those little rec things that we used to do, they actually started organizing more, and like what Doug was saying, then it became they started formalizing and all of that stuff. But that was part of like getting that stuff together, organizing. That's what I do to this day. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I know we're running close to time. I have just one more question to the committee here. Me being part of the younger generation, the past recent generation, I think this question is very relevant and very important. How do any of you think and believe that Kramer Manor Park will affect the next generation?
Well, the groundwork has been done. The groundwork, the seed has been planted. From right now, we're just watching it grow, and just like you said, so what we planted when we were younger, Caleb, when you got there, you kind of felt that same vibe, and have it going. I mean, the best thing to do is I love it when I see kids at the park playing by themselves, not with their parents, by playing. Kids actually playing and creating and learning and having fun, and that's that right now. That's all we can do.
Yeah, what I'd like for everybody to understand, because I have a different take than everybody else, because I was 11 in 1968 when we came to Kramer Manor, and we came from East Orange, Newark area, and a lot of the residents, for some reason, all the family members were police officers, as we spoke earlier in the tape. But Kramer Manor, used to have the basketball courts up in the parking lot. The field house used to be up at the top where the swings are. And just to watch the transformation over the years, and especially for me coming from East Orange and then coming out here, it felt like coming to a farm. I mean, it was deer and it was all this open space, and it was so much to do at the park. You could do basketball, soccer, you could do slide down when the snow came, they had the perfect hill for snow sliding. So it was everything for us. But like they said, it's the nucleus. And I just wanted to thank everybody for this opportunity that we were able to share with you guys. It meant a lot to me.
Thank you for answering my questions. I really do appreciate that. And I do want to now open it up to, I want to see if I can change open it up to the community for any questions.
Caleb, we have a few questions on the chat, and I can read them to the rest of the team. And then if anybody wants to ask questions, just unmute yourself. Nancy Piawar asked a question which Jill answered also on chat, but it's really a good question and really a fascinating discovery. Are there any Kramer family members alive? So you want to take that one, Jill, a little further? Talk about ancestry and all of that good stuff?
Yes, so we were actually able to connect with a few of the descendants of the Kramer family. They live down in Florida, and they provided us some really good information. We were able to connect them with Deacon Green as well, because Deacon Green always talked about Stella that lived over in Daniel Place. So he knew her, and so that was sort of our focus, to connect with her family. And so we were able to connect with her family and allow him to meet them. It was through that conversation that we just learned so much more about Stella and her family, and we received pictures that you saw in the presentation from that family as well.
Stella was very curious. When we were interviewing with Mr. Green, and they had so many questions for Mr. Green about the neighborhood, and Mr. Green filled in a lot of open spots they had in their life about the community, and it was really good, really touching.
That's a good question coming.
Robert Lombard has asked a question, which I think was a question that we all had, and that Doug particularly, you might want to answer this question, Doug. Do we know why the Kramer brothers focused their promotion of this property to African Americans?
I really am intrigued with this question. We know from their address history that the Kramers were living in and around Harlem near the time of the Harlem Renaissance. But that, so I think that they had some familiarity. We know that they came from Russia and sort of got to Cincinnati and worked their way east to the early years of the 20th century. What drew them to pick Kramer? I think part of the answer, frankly, is in Jerseyland. It is not an accident to me, and the older I get, the fewer coincidences I think really exist, that Jerseyland Park began as a going operation several months after the Kramer Realties acquired that site. I think a community that can support a golf club, they thought is a community that is affluent enough to be able to afford single family houses. And I think that would have happened had they been able to, unimpeded by, government harassment, arson, and what have you. I think his vision could have been realized a lot earlier.
Thanks, Doug. Here's a question from Sasha Slocum. You mentioned the neighborhood was improved when McGinn School was in the planning stages of being built. Do you know if or how the Kramer residents were involved in the planning of the school and the redevelopment of the area? Great question. Who would like to take that one?
Oki?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of phone call in the middle of that.
I don't think we know whether or not the Kramer Manor residents were involved in the planning of the school.
Well,
I think we can say that the Kramer Manor community was one of the biggest beneficiaries.
Now, what happened? Mr. Lee, Bob Lee was a new police officer. He was a new police officer for Scotch Plains. And at the time, the Jewish temple was going to go up top where McGinn School was. So when he was kind of upset, and one of his co-workers asked Mr. Lee why he was so upset, and Mr. Lee said that he goes, they're offering me not a lot of money for my house, and I really don't want to sell it. So whoever he was talking to downtown in the municipal building in Scotch Plains said, let me get back to you. So he goes and said, well, there's two things. They had the urban renewal project going on, and they said we have a school and we have a Jewish synagogue that we're gonna put up. At the time, the Lees owned 3 lots on Wilson Avenue, right next to each other. So the person said, if you can get all 3 lots sold, if you can get me all 3 parcels, we'll move the school up on the hill, and we will give you the money for the school, which is a little bit more money than was for the temple. And so Mr. Lee,
Kramer Manor back in the 50s.
Mr. Lee went and asked his two other neighbors and who were his relatives, and they said okay. They were kind of on the fence about it. So the one relative signed, and then one relative signed and then did not want to do it. So they had to go back right next door to Jill to where the grandmother was, and the grandmother talked that person into signing it over. So Mr. Lee finally got all 3 parcels sold, went back to the town. Then the town bought out those 3 lots. That's how McGinn School got up there, because they bought out the lots from the Lees, and then McGinn School went there, and Temple Israel went to where it is now. That's
Thank
right next
you.
to my
Thank
college.
you both. Somebody was trying to talk, and I'm wondering if anybody that person would like to unmute and give their comment about this question.
I think it was Arlene.
Arlene? Does anybody have any other questions that they would like to ask? Okay, Michael Loberfeld is asking, it is obvious that Kramer Manor has had and currently has a sense of community and kinship that is special in nature. How do you see this unique sense of community continuing or evolving in the next 100 years? I am thinking that this fabric of Kramer Manor is so unique and vibrant that will have a journey for many years to come.
Well, between the Kramer Manor reunion, the Trenton Avenue block parties, that is what we're doing to keeping this thing going and showing the Kramer Manor love to anybody that wants to come and visit and see. Everybody that comes into the community, no matter what, they're absorbed in. When you come to a Kramer Manor reunion, you come back. When you go to Trenton Avenue, it's so much fun, you cannot help but come back.
And not only that, you know, the one year we did the T-shirts, we did hats, we had 2 fish and 5 loaves. Who's the Kramer Manor resident? They provided the food. We had Bill Flagg with ERA come. We had different politicians come to speak. But yeah.
I mean, our neighborhood is a plug and play good time. I mean, there's 3 DJs that live on Washington Avenue. That's from Washington Avenue over here. We've got cooks. Derek is a heck of a cook. He organizes all the food.
Jill, though. So is Jill and Felton.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes, don't forget about
Jill and Felton.
catering.
Jill and Felton. I mean, that's what I'm saying. We have so many people that have businesses that please people.
And so to add to that, I was going to say that we did an ad journal one year and at the reunion, and it was a time for all the family members that grew up there to showcase or show off their family members, you know, their family members' business. And it was quite successful. And along the way, we have some fallen soldiers, and we always honor them in the ad journal as well.
Yes.
And we're going to have like different competitions, like we spoke about Lamont Davis. We'll have the best golf shot by award from Lamont Davis, like the Kobe Bryant Award will be the Lamont Davis Award for the best golf swing. And we're going to do the Tony Ebron from Kramer Manor resident. We're going to have the Tony Ebron foul shot contest. So different things like that from the community. So hopefully this 100 years old, we'll have a lot to talk about.
Thank you. It looks like we've reached our time. Beth, I don't know if there's any wiggle room for our last question or if we should answer that at another time.
Absolutely. I see there is one more question in the chat. I'd love for you to answer it if everyone's willing to stay on, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. How has the geography, this is from Giovanni Sullivan, how has the geography of the Kramer Manor changed over the years as housing developed? Was the large hill in Kramer Manor always there, or have areas been flattened? If McGinn was not built in the area where it is now, how do you think that it would have affected the community to this day? Anyone want to take on this multi-pronged question, especially the large hill?
Well, one thing about the hill where McGinn School is, Mr. Green came from Westfield, and on West Broad Street, there used to be a path that went from the corner of West Broad Street over to where McGinn School is. Okay, there was a path that came over there. So that was a link from Fanwood to Westfield. There was a path that they would travel daily. where the school is up on the hill, it was a lot of dirt roads back then. So when Derek moved here, a lot of roads weren't complete. A lot of roads weren't finished. There was still dirt roads around.
Right.
Um,
Lots with no houses, right?
exactly, a lot plots with no houses. And if you actually go to McGinn School and you look to the left of McGinn School, you'll see a house and it's kind of facing kind of weird. But that house was part of Wilson Avenue years ago when there
Across
was
from Daniel Street in Roosevelt.
Yep. That house up on the corner that was there. I'm trying to think of the hill. When I came there late. Derek, you can talk more about the hill. The hill was always there, right?
The hill was always there from when I.
Okay.
Yeah,
Who
and
was it?
actually,
Who was
actually on Trenton Avenue, on the corner house on Trenton Avenue, Trenton Avenue used to house a pond. It used to house a pond. So what happened is the Davises, Lamont Davis, Theriel Davis, that's the house they grew up in. But the original house that Mr. Davis bought is on Evelyn Street, where the church is on Evelyn Street, right across from the park. That was Mr. Davis's house. So Mr. Davis started building the foundation to the house right there on Evelyn Street. Mr. Kramer came to Mr. Davis and said, you know, I wanted to put a church overlooking the pasture. It was a pasture out there. There was farmland there. I want a church overlooking the pasture, and I'm going to give you the lot with the pond on it.
Okay.
And Mr. Davis went for the switch. So Mr. Davis' house, the brick house that's on the corner of Trenton Avenue and Washington, at the end of Washington, that's how that house got there. And the Davises went there, and they took the church that was a residential house, and they made it a church, the second church.
Thank you. Kevin, was it you really briefly or Doug who told me about buried houses?
That was me. When they were making the field improvements for soccer in the early 2000s, they found that hill, when you go down Evelyn toward the park, there's a pretty bank slope, that there are a string of houses that are under that slope, and that those houses had various degrees of asbestos contamination. And doing that work, they could leave what structures remained there in place as long as they did not disturb them. Because had they disturbed those structures, then they would have been obligated to undertake a very extensive remediation exercise. I believe Kevin, I think, talked about some excavations, soil excavations that were some years before. I mean, in the 70s. I'm talking about in the year 2004, 5, 6 time frame.
Over there where Doug is talking about, right, going down the hill. If you go down the hill, there was an area there. It's kind of across from where the side of the tennis court. There was a red barn. That red barn was one of the first churches. That's the church that's on the hill on Evelyn. That red barn was the start of that church. Now also at the end of Washington Avenue on Cliffwood Street, right next to where Temple Israel is, that was I forgot the gentleman's name, but that gentleman had a farm there. A little farm there with animals and everything, and it went all the way over to where the parking lot is in Kramer Manor.
Well, thank you both, thank you all. And here you see the URL for Social Justice Matters. And right now you can view the film in its entirety and flip through the ad journal and read more history on the Social Justice Matters website. Interviews and transcripts will follow this spring, and copies will be housed in the Scotch Plains, Fanwood, and Plainfield Public Libraries, along with paper copies of Pamela Townsend's book and the History Ad Journal.
And we'll see you guys in 2023.
Just wanted to add here that we owe so much to and deeply thank the individuals who graciously agreed to be interviewed. and provided their time and insights. Their stories and observations are now out there so future generations will know the origins of Kramer Manor and what followed. We are also deeply appreciative of the many professionals who donated their research and other skills in helping us to fill out the story and history of Kramer Manor. It was truly a community project.
Next slide, please.
I want to just take a moment and say thank you to all of you on this project. For me personally, I could have sat and listened to these stories about the neighborhood for quite a few more hours. I felt like I was a part of it and, really look forward to the events that you're throwing in the future. So thank you so much, Pam, Kevin, Pam, Derek, Jill, Douglas, and Caleb for sharing the history, for sharing your experiences. We're all a little better for knowing the deeply rooted history of this town and the neighborhood, and just a beautiful representation of the community. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. If you'd like to support Social Justice Matters, please hop over to their website. It's full of resources and information. You can click to be added to their mailing list or to make a donation. If you'd like more information about the JCC, Caleb, I'm going to ask you to pop our website in there as well. You can look for upcoming events. We are so pleased to have partnered with you on this tonight. It's a really important of our town history. So thank you everybody from SJM and Caleb. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this presentation and learned a little something new about our town and our community tonight. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Be well.
All right, don't forget to order the book.
Tonight.